Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's been a while. Apologies, we haven't kept on top of things. It's been a very busy period in our lives, but welcome back, Heart of the Cast, and we're bringing you the latest. It's Legacy of Destruction, new set, and new format in a way.
Yes. So the plan for today is we're going to talk about Legacy of Destruction and also look back at the impact that it's had on the first week of regionals. I don't know if you've looked into it, but I've spent a stream this week looking at like different regional results, different things that have been topping here and there. Spoilers, Snake Eyes is still one of them, but obviously we're going to talk about stuff that came right out of Legacy of Destruction and has gotten some support. And there's some interesting stuff to talk about, I feel like.
Yeah, we really need a Road of the King for the TCG. There was Duel Chronicles, I think, was like trying to do that, and then it just isn't really working out. So
Yeah, they just stopped. Do you know why? I don't know.
yeah,
I
Scrub, why
enjoyed
did you
using that.
stop? Yeah, I think it's just like laziness in a in a
Okay.
nice simple way.
Yeah.
Anyway, as promised, we'll keep things nice and chill and casual for the first 5-10 minutes, and then we'll
Yeah.
start the deep dive here. So where have you been? What's been up?
Yeah, I have a fun story to tell
Okay, what
for
happened?
the casual part. I have I don't know if I've told this on the podcast before. I definitely have on my stream, but I haven't had locals in the longest time simply because I didn't have anything close. But I do now. I a locals opened right next to where I live. It's like
In
5
your
minutes by
town?
train. It's wonderful.
Oh, that's good.
Well, the store didn't open. They've just not had Yu-Gi-Oh. It's been open for a while. They just
Oh, I
haven't had
see.
Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments.
What was the
They've been
turnout?
doing Magic and all that, and now they had like a small community. They were just playing there for fun, and now the owner has become an OTS store. From what if I understood that correctly,
What was your
and
turnout?
they hosted their very first locals last Saturday, and I don't
Stop
know if
Dodo
you've
Wallet me.
seen,
Tell me the attendance.
huh?
Tell me the attendance.
It's like 15.
That's fine. Honestly,
Yeah, no,
like
for their very first one, I was pretty happy with that.
that's always the worry with locals is like,
Yeah.
you have like just basically 4 people and it's like, well, we could just sit and duel. We don't need to pay
Yeah.
entry. But anyway,
No,
go on.
I was pleasantly surprised because I've never been to the store. I was just made aware that like okay, we have locals for the very first time, and then it's just like it's 15 people. I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to being able to play locals again. But anyways, because the store owner normally is a Magic guy and other games, I suppose maybe, but he didn't really know that much about Yu-Gi-Oh when he registered the tournament with like the software or whatever. I don't know how you do it. I'm not a tournament organizer, but apparently the way it works is you have to select what kind of tournament you want to host. And one part of that selection is you have to select between traditional and advanced. Uh, and so my guy looked at it and thought, "Hey, I just want to have a normal Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. You know, that's what everyone wants, right? So like, surely traditional is what that is, right? Advanced sounds kind of crazy. You know, I just want a normal Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. And so they hosted it as traditional by accident. And I didn't know that until like the day before. And then so I was like, okay, you know, I cooked up my Runic Lightsworn deck, and
Threw in
I
one
just
pot of
went.
greed.
I didn't put anything in. I was just like, dude, I don't want to play traditional. I just want to play normal games. I just want to go, and I was hoping everyone else would do the same. And when I got there, I was talking to a couple of people, you know, met them for the first time. It was nice, and I was talking to some of them, and they were like, yeah, don't worry about it. Everyone just has normal decks, right? I'm like, okay, chill. So I sit down round one,
Clueless.
right?
Clueless.
Yeah, exactly. I sit down round one, right? I go first. I get drolled on Hugin and I just pass with it's just me and my fountain, you know. And my opponent goes graceful charity. And I'm like, all right, cool. And draws 3, discards 2.
What did he
Uh,
discard? What did he
two.
discard?
He discarded 2 spell cards and activated Engage.
Well, to be fair, at least it's not like Rhino Merly or something.
And ironically, when they activated Graceful, I was expecting worse because turns out they just played Sky Striker because that's their favorite deck. They had it like all max rarity and everything, and they just played like all the broken spell cards at one, and like I got seed when I went first in game 2. And I banished Mystic Mine with my runic cards, so I dodged the bullet there. So all that kind of stuff. I saw Pot of Greed and everything. But yeah, no, it was pretty funny, and it was also pretty cool Or it's pretty cool that I have locals now, so I can like bring all kinds of fun stuff to it.
That's really hilarious. So hopefully that will be fixed for next time. But also at the same time, traditional format once in a while is kind of like funny to play and try out.
It could be. It could be. It's just it was a matter of, it was like I found out the day before and I don't even know if I have the cards necessary for it laying around, and I didn't want to just slap like, I don't know, a pot of greed in my like runic deck. I don't know. That felt wrong.
Our locals hosted a unlimited tournament one week. Unlimited,
Oh,
by the
like
way,
where
not
everything's at
traditional.
3 even?
Yeah, unlimited.
Oh
Um,
my god.
it's really funny how busted tier is that you don't play Pot of Greed. There's no space.
I
You don't
saw
need
that.
it.
Yeah, I
Um,
saw that. That's crazy.
like it's crazy to think that that is the deck that power creeps Pot of Greed. So, um, yeah, I don't, just on the more casual side as well. The duel trial that's been happening in Macedon has been, well. The last one was kind of a dud. I didn't enjoy the normal summon one at all, but the
Mhm.
skill drain one was pretty hilarious. I was cooking up a bunch of like different funny strategies for that and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it opens up the discussion of like, just because you were talking about traditional, like this kind of thing like feels like it should happen way more often. Just these like different rule sets and different
Yeah.
alternative like game modes and stuff like that. They don't
Mhm.
just don't do this enough. Um,
Yeah.
and like just as like as a small thing, obviously content creator bias.
Yeah.
When you open a duel room, you can't set the rules as duel trial. You can do it for festivals, but not
Yeah,
duel
yeah,
trial.
I know. Yeah, that kind of sucks, yeah.
Yeah, but as a general thing, like I think that's probably an interesting way to experiment with the with Yu-Gi-Oh in the format, because clearly they have the development and coding in place to be able to just, hey, this duel you start with skill drain. Have you ever
Yeah.
played Hearthstone?
I have played Hearthstone, yes.
Did you ever play much of the Tavern Brawls?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, so imagine that in Macedon. That'd be pretty fun, right? Just
Where it's
like,
like every week you have a set one with special rules. That'd be pretty cool.
yeah.
I mean, the dual trials that they are doing are kind of that, right? Like it's just how long are these? These are only for like 3 days, always.
Yeah, they're like, it's also super cursed because like the
Yeah.
reward is a pack. Like, come on,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
What? Like one pack. You want me to craft like, remember the Goat dual trial, for example? You want me to craft like ultra rares and stuff for one pack? Like, as a content
I
creator, I was okay with that. But as a
I
normal
did that,
duelist,
and I genuinely, for that one, to me it felt worth it because I did have a lot of fun with the event as well. Like
yeah.
it's like if the event is fun enough and I can play it for long enough past like the 3 games just to get the pack, then it's fine by me. Because I spent like an entire stream playing that format. Well, it turns out I actually ended up playing it with my viewers, and we had to like because we couldn't set the rules for the dual room. We just
It's
had to
so
be like, yeah,
cursed.
a promise. I'm just gonna pass when you want to go first because of the
It's
sixth card.
clueless.
And then I played against Quantle and summoned, what was it? Quantle. I won the coin flip, so I made Quantle start, so he has to pass and get me the 6th card, right? And I normal summoned the gorilla that has to attack by accident,
Oh yeah, yeah. We
and
did
then
that
it didn't
mistake as
let me
well.
skip my battle phase. I
Berserk
scammed him.
Gorilla. Scammed him at
Uh,
2,000 life points.
yeah, yeah. I don't know why they don't let you select the rule set for dual rooms. That'd be pretty funny. But IRL, literally, this literally only happens as an accident, like the traditional one. I guess Time Wizard is a thing that's getting more and more popular. But just
Yeah.
judging by the popularity of Time Wizard, you'd think stuff like that could do well in paper as well.
For first world problems as streamers, did you have any comedians in your duel room like show up and just normal summon Rhino Heart when you did the GOAT event?
No, I had the most comedian thing that anyone did was normal summon Little D, but that was technically legal.
Ah, true. Okay, that works. Yeah. All right. So that's I suppose enough yapping. Let's get into some TCG Hot Legacy of Destruction
Yup.
action. I don't know if you wanna how you wanna take this. Like, do you wanna go from like deck to deck, or like do you wanna pick out cards first?
I was definitely, so I think first things first, because we haven't done it, is we talk a little bit about the set itself and what we maybe what out of the set we are looking forward to. I don't know if we have to cover every single thing, but like maybe some highlights.
Should
And
we start
then
with maybe the big elephant in the room, which is like a lot of people already molding at Tenpai?
Yes, because that's what I want to segue into is like some of the first week's results because we already have that luxury because we're not doing this one like before the set drops, we're doing it after. Like we already saw some of these decks do well and some of these decks not show up at all, right? And so I feel like we can mention that. We can also mention that while we talk about the individual decks. Maybe that's smarter. Yeah. Let's just go through some archetypes, and we go through the ones that we find the most interesting, and maybe towards the end we can talk about some more niche stuff that's in there as well, depending on how long this takes.
Yeah, fair. So the big new deck that's been released is Tenpai, a
Yes.
dragon synchro deck. For those of you who are uninitiated, it's based on an old school synchro monster. One of the first synchro monsters I ever actually pulled randomly was a trident dragon. Should have kept it in my collection. Clearly, that was
for
my
your
mistake.
friends to ask you.
But it's a dragon synchro deck that is probably the first in a long time a pretty pure go second deck. There's very few ways to really make that truly be a go first deck. So it's a go second deck that performs a bunch of synchro summons in the battle phase as quick effects, and has so much firepower behind it that you can actually deal lethal damage through Pot of Prosperity.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of toolbox effects that allow it to basically just destroy cards. And also, most importantly, it's very, what's the word? It's very well protected because all of your dragons are unaffected. That's probably one of the worst things about it. So do you want to talk about the deck like conceptually first of all before we get into like the details of techs and results?
Yeah. I mean, like the thing is, Tenpai literally is an archetype that I think the way it was created was literally someone sat down and was like, we want a deck that is actually viable going second OTK strategy because they've tried in the past. Like there's a couple of archetypes like that from recent years, but nothing has really. It feels like nothing has really clicked. Like you look at Mikanko and stuff like that, right? They've been kind of working out. They're not bad, but they haven't quite made it into like super meta relevance. The most meta relevant Mikanko decks were still going first and just using the cards in like other ways.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the irony. It's like
Exactly.
the Go second deck was still better going first than TCG anyway.
And so with Tenpai, it really feels like they sat down and they were like, you know what? This time around, we're gonna make this so good that it's gonna work. Like we're gonna make going second a deck again. We don't care how ignorant it's going to be. We don't care how broken we have to make the cards. This time, we're gonna shove going second down your throats. And like so the way they achieve this is basically Tenpai has this mechanic where it basically completely, I think that's the reason why they made it that way, but it completely ignores Nibiru because most of it happens in the battle phase itself. Which that part I think is kind of cool. I think that's kind of neat that the deck actually has a lot of stuff that it can do inside the battle phase, which is normally a phase where you can't do that much. And then the next problem that you face when you design it that way is like, well, how do you get to the battle phase, right? How do you like deploy your monsters to go into the battle phase when your opponent has all these interactions in the main phase already? And so they were like, okay, well, we're going to make it a field spell that just says during your main phase 1, all your dragon fire monsters are completely unaffected by everything, right?
They did, did they even make it like act unaffected by monsters or like
No, it's
unaffected
just
by
unaffected.
traps?
It's just nah.
Yep, you can't just completely unaffected. Which for those of you who have been playing for a decent amount of time now, you probably remember when Miscellaneousaurus became a big part of the Dino strategy and how frustrating it was that you could completely turn off all interaction. And I think that's always been the key point of fun that we've always discussed on the cast is the idea that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is at its best when you interact with your opponent, when you're trading resources, when you're going back and forth with responses. And Tenpai kind of completely shuts that down. So for better or for worse, it's a deck that is removing a lot of interaction in some respects.
Yeah. The one thing about it is you can't interact with the field spell, which is why I've seen cards like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit go back into people's decks for the last weekend in anticipation of Tenpai, because the field spell does not only protect your stuff by making it unaffected, but it also is a once per turn add one. I don't know if it specifically says Tenpai or Fire Dragon. I think it says Tenpai. Add one Tenpai from your deck to your hand and then discard a card. And so if you ogre it on that effect, it's gone, and then the stuff becomes affected again and all that, right? Also, the cards become affected in the battle phase. The problem is that all of them are quick effect synchro summons, right? And this is
Once
the
per
trick.
turn, by the way.
Yeah, this is the trick why they do so much damage is because the stuff attacks, then activates the effect to synchro summon with it. Then the synchros attack, you synchro them off into bigger synchros, and some stuff comes back from the graveyard and can attack again, and then you synchro with it again, and then the synchro can attack, so on and so forth, right? And then sometimes the Trident Dragion even gets its attack doubled by the field spell, because when the field spell is destroyed, it also doubles the effect of a synchro monster, because you don't need it in the battle phase anymore, because it's done its job once you've gotten to the battle phase. Um, so a lot of very very good stuff, and I'm not gonna lie. When I read these cards for the first time, I didn't anticipate it to be that strong. Obviously, we saw in the OCG relatively quickly that the deck was like real. But at my very first read, I was just like, okay, well, it's a blind second deck. Surely that can't be good. But it turns out making everything unaffected is a pretty good way to make going second actually viable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think the prototype was maybe like Warrock, and then they were like, yeah, let's make a go second deck. You know, here we go. This Warrock, you can special summon with the field spell in the battle phase, and then
yeah.
realize very quickly that, you know what, it really is just the case that sometimes you have to put a big blanket effect that just says your cards cannot interact with my cards. And
Yeah.
even so, as we segue into the actual metagame of this, even still, the deck is fine. It's not like tier zero insane crazy broken, like, you know what, like that's the wild thing. You put
Yeah.
something as egregious as a clause on cards saying you can't interact with me, and still the deck is just behind Snake Eye, at least for now, like unequivocally behind the deck in terms of pure raw results and
I
tops
would
this weekend.
argue the way that Tenpai Dragon works, though, that is kind of exactly where it wants to be. It feels very
Yeah.
hard for a deck like this to actually be the best deck in the format, if you know what I mean. Like it's like the kind of deck where it is very good at what it does, but it is very one-dimensional, right? It's got that one mode. It's really good at that one mode, but if your opponent has answers or ways to play around your one OTK mode, the deck suddenly looks very, very weak. And that, like, there's literally cards out there that this deck cannot beat. Like it's good against like your normal stuff that end boards make, but if your opponent flips like something as hilarious as a threatening roar, you can't do anything to them. Like you like seals pass on them, like, or like there's some, you can make like a crystal wing maybe, but like nothing crazy. Um, and so if that deck ever was like in a position as popular as Snake Eye is at the moment, like people would just beat it, you know? Like it wouldn't be that hard. If your task is beat Tenpai Dragon, you can build a deck that achieves that almost every time because the deck just does only one thing. And so that's why best decks in the format are usually more versatile than that. You rarely have a best deck in the format that has like only one mode, has to go second, or needs the battle phase to work. You know, Snake Eyes is a deck that's much more versatile than that. Um, but I kind of, as much as people say Tenpai is like boring the way it plays because the deck is like a lot of non-engine as well. Like people just slap a lot of hand traps in it and then OTK you with one card. I do agree with that. I think the play pattern, like what they did in order to make going second viable, is kind of questionable. The whole unaffected stuff and so on and so forth. At
And
the
one
same
card
time, I
combos
find
as
it kind
well.
of interesting how it changes deck building dynamics for everyone, right? Like the fact that a going second deck is in the format for the first time in a long time and it actually needs to be respected. I find that interesting from a deck building perspective, like for everyone.
It's an interesting point as well that you mentioned that it's like in a perfect spot in terms of its representation and popularity. Because deck building wise, if it is the best deck, then it becomes really targeted. And
Yeah.
Tenpai is a deck that's very easy to target, whereas like something like Snake Eye, it's not very easy to target Snake Eye. You just have to hand trap it a lot. There's not really a ton of blowouts in the same way that like literally a threatening roar could be a blowout.
Yeah.
We've got some numbers here if anyone's curious. So for the week before last, 22 to 28th. Shoutouts to Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta for this. It's in beta right now, but we have the other Meta website. We've got Tenpai Dragon at 12 tops across reported regionals and submitted lists and profiles on YouTube and stuff like that. So obviously not the complete picture, but it's hilarious that it's actually like apparently so far ahead of every other deck that is in Snake Eye. So branded, voiceless, Kashtira still not doing as well as Tenpai, which is quite impressive. I feel like for an opening weekend.
Yeah, I've seen other like spreadsheets where voiceless was slightly ahead, but it definitely seemed like it was Snake Eye decks that was split between Pure and Fire King. Then it was voiceless and Tenpai very close to each other, and then it was the rest basically. And if you, it's interesting because if you look at the OCG development, it was pretty similar to this. It was pretty much exactly that. It was Tenpai Dragon feels like it took over like one OCG metagame report, its first one, by storm. Like Tenpai was way bigger than I had ever expected it to be. And then the weeks after, it started getting lower and lower representations in top cuts and winning lists because people realized, like, oh, Tenpai is a thing, right? And for some people, it still worked, but it lost that surprise factor, and it is a kind of deck that really needs that. I feel like to be consistently good. Um,
And just to
Speaking
clarify,
of,
these OCG results, they're always best of one, aren't they, right?
no, the regular like the
Oh, those are
OCG
best of three.
metagames, it's
Okay,
only the YCSs that are best of one.
sure.
Which
Which
in
is
the
interesting
in
that
the
Tenpai got second place at the
at the
recent YCS
at the YCS that they had last week, which was the biggest trading card game tournament ever, by the way. That was best of one, and Tenpai was played at like 35%.
Is this play or top rate?
Play, that's the play rate, and there was once that I think out of the known deck lists in top 64, there was one Snake Eye.
How was Tenpai doing in the top cut? Do you
Tenpai was
remember?
the most represented. I don't know by how
Most
many, but
represented in
in
top
top
cut?
64, it was
Okay,
the
wow.
most represented.
It probably should have won as well, because if you actually watch that final game, it was atrocious. That guy did not draw a playable card for like 4 turns.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. But yeah, best of one. For any Master Duel listeners of the podcast,
Yeah,
that
no.
deck's gonna be really enjoyable when it comes to the game.
As much as you think Tenpai is maybe manageable in best of 3, which I think it is, like I just think it's as simple as if Tenpai is moderately represented, you have to prepare for it, and then you're gonna be okay against it. Obviously, still sometimes it's gonna beat you, like any deck can. But if you prepare for it, it should be okay. In Master Duel, none of that really. Like I feel like it's gonna be very very hard to prepare for that deck in a best of one, because what are you gonna do? Like build your deck in a way that it completely sucks against other matchups, or are you going to start playing blind second decks yourself or whatever? Like I don't know, it's weird. In a best of one environment, a deck like that definitely is even scarier than in a best of 3.
It's really awkward because there isn't like one card that you can play that beats Tenpai that isn't also like kind of terrible versus other things. Like a kind of tech
Yeah.
card that I've been thinking about like is Rise to Full Height in a mill deck is kind of decent. We're gonna talk a little bit about Lightsworn, for example, which unironically you could like put that in your deck if you don't want to lose to Tenpai. There's like some things you can do. D-Barrier is a card that has a lot of good crossover, for example, and especially against Tenpai, Labyrinth can just search that card. So there are ways to beat it in best of one, but let's focus on the TCG here and talk about the best of 3. Tenpai, I think, has been citing D-Barrier itself, but also Heatwave is a card that's...
Okay, so this is another like aspect of this entire situation that I do find kind of interesting, because obviously Tenpai is a going second deck and wants to go second every time. So what this brings up the question: if you, like, let's say you lose a game against Tenpai in a best of 3, in the next game, do you still go first because your deck wants to go first, or do you just make them start, right? And the way that Tenpai players are reacting to this, because a lot of people have been making them start, or they are expecting people to make them start, is they cite cards like Heatwave, which is a card that reads, start of your main phase 1, similar to Cold Wave back in the day. You can only activate that at the very start of your turn, essentially. And neither player can normal or special summon affect monsters until your next turn, right? So like it locks you out for your own turn, and then it locks your opponent out for their first turn as well. And so what you're trying to achieve with this is, well, my opponent makes me start, so I'm going to activate Heat Wave, so I skip my first turn, and then they skip their first turn. So then it's essentially like I'm going first, but with a battle phase. And I'm just going to OTK, obviously, right? And then there's other things like Tenpais can side all the floodgates in the world when they expect to be made first, right?
And
But
Dimension
then when
Shifter
you're
as
the
well.
opponent of Tenpai, you can take it a step further and you're like, okay, well, I'm expecting my opponent to side in all these cards that are completely useless going second, right? Like all these, they're maybe swapping out some of their board breakers right now or some of their hand traps that I'm so scared of in order to put these cards in their deck. I'm gonna still just go first. I'm gonna side like maybe D-Barrier or whatever and just go first and hope they draw like Heat Waves and all that kind of useless stuff. And then I'll flip D-Barrier and just win the game, which is also something you can do. And it's very interesting, or it's going to be interesting to see what the most like relevant or like the most popular ways to deal with the deck are going to be.
Yeah, and going second is obviously its forte. But going first, what do we think we have in terms of answers? Because watching some testing, literally just good old faithful Seals Pass is pretty much all the deck has been doing. And funnily enough, if you are not familiar with Tenpai, you can die to Tenpai by going to the battle phase yourself. Because a lot of people might fall into this trap where I've made Tenpai start, they go Seals Pass, you go, okay, normal summon a guy. Battle phase, they go Seals, bounce like a card, maybe the field spell, and they have a bunch of like plays that they can do that forces you to attack them because the synchro monster, the 10, says all monsters your opponent controls must attack if able. You can actually climb up into a 10 synchro on your opponent's turn and make them attack you. Like it's really funny that in theory you could like make your opponent OTK themselves.
I would think that is something that would only happen if you're not familiar with the cards, because if they have to pass, then you probably are free to play around that. At the same time, don't forget that Tenpai is like a deck that probably has room for like 20 hand traps if they want to, because the engine is very, very small. And so that's the other thing, right? No matter if you make them start or if they make, or if you choose to go first, at the end of the day, having to play through those cards is never going to be easy. And you're basically constantly under the threat of just dying to one card if you're not careful. So it's a very it feels like a very high tension matchup. You know, it feels like you're always like on the verge of losing, even if you're getting what you want because you get to go first or you made them start and they can't do much or whatever. It always feels very, very close.
Yeah. Anything else you want to bring up about Tenpai before we talk about new deck?
I think since we're talking about the entirety of the set today, I feel like that's about it. I think we're gonna observe what happens with it, but it definitely seems like it's a force to be reckoned with. Although I'm personally, actually, I guess we can leave it at that note. I am actually personally not a big fan of the deck. It feels I just don't like playing a deck that feels so exploitable. That's not saying it's. I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it'll ever be my choice for a tournament. But yeah, I think it's good. I also think it's going to be very popular because it's going to be relatively cheap. Obviously, the freaking super rare from it is already like $10, and I think it's even more in like on TCG Player. But it's outside of Trident Dragion, the deck is definitely relatively cheap.
Yeah, I mean, even with Trident Dragon, you need
Even
one
with,
copy.
yes,
You know,
yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, like this is a pretty budget deck. You know, you guys know how Yu-Gi-Oh is, so it probably is your best choice if you want to play somewhat decently competitively. Although there are a couple of other options we can talk about later in
Mm.
terms of budget that I do want to bring up today. But yeah, just as a general like recap of Tenpai, I think personally there's two ways to look at it. It's either number one, it brings up all of the worst aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh, which is unaffected cards, uninteractive cards, one card combos as well, especially, which is probably some of the most egregious stuff, which facilitates this 20 hand trap deck building playstyle. But further than that, it's also utilizing a lot of other uninteractive cards with its uninteractive field spell. You know, you play things like
Hmm.
Heat Wave, you play things like Shifters, so it's really frustrating for a lot of players. And one thing as well is, even if it was okay, or rather if it was like the best deck, a lot of higher end players might really be frustrated with this deck because there isn't really a lot of skill expression in this
No,
deck.
there isn't.
It's
Yeah, there
pretty
really isn't.
quick to learn this, and pick up how to actually pilot the deck.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very straightforward thing. Just pull off your combo. As long as you learn like the sequencing of how to do the maximum amount of damage, you're basically done. It's a little bit about, of course, hand trap usage, board breaker usage, like fundamental stuff, but like for the most part, it doesn't have a lot of depth in
Nothing
it.
particularly unique to it, anyway.
No.
Everything you mentioned there, that's just like a Yu-Gi-Oh thing, right? But
Yeah,
Tenpai
yeah, yeah.
specific stuff, you know, unaffected Black Rose Dragon. I mean, there's some fun stuff you can do with the deck. To be fair, like
It is definitely the type of deck that if you pull it off, I can see the player playing it having a lot of fun. You know,
yeah.
just being just like laying back and being like, you know what, I don't care what you do. I've got Droplet, Lightning Storm, and the one card combo in my hand. Just do your thing, man. And then you just punch him against the wall after they comboed you for 10 minutes.
So in terms of Legacy of Destruction, do you want to bring up any specific cards or any other archetypes?
Okay, so I'm just gonna go. Well, let's just go back and forth and mentioning something we want to talk about from the set until we run out of stuff we want to talk about. I've already mentioned it earlier. My favorite cards out of the new set are probably the Lightsworn cards.
I am
Um,
such a big fan of this. Now, it's funny
yes,
because the way I'm playing Lightsworn is going to
we're not
probably
the
be
same. No, no, I
very
know, I
different from
know.
you. Um, yeah,
Okay, so just in general, they have received, I think it's 4 new cards where 3 of them are very relevant. And then there's a trap card, but they've gotten 2 new level 4 monsters. They've got the little Dragonling, which is a level 4 dragon Lightsworn that says if you have a Lightsworn in the grave, you can special summon it from your hand. If it is special summoned, you can send a Lightsworn monster from your deck to the graveyard.
it's so
And
good.
if it's sent to the graveyard itself, it searches your deck for a dragon monster with 3k attack and 2600 defense, which is specifically Punishment Dragon or Judgment Dragon.
It's so good. It's a
So
lot of people have been equating it to circular. It needs a little bit of setup, but it is really, really powerful. It's a one
it,
card Minerva synchro,
yeah,
which is I think like for all intents and purposes really is just Magic Dragon, right?
it's kind of close, yeah. So yeah, that card is really good. And then you have the synchro that you just mentioned. The new Minerva is a level 8 synchro that Dragon Link the Dragon Link makes with 1 card because obviously you can send Felis. And so the Minerva synchro reads. You on summon you send Lightsworns with different types from your deck to the graveyard up to the number of Lightsworns used for its synchro summon. So because you're making it with 2 Lightsworns, you get to send 2 Lightsworns with different types, which essentially means the 2 bodies you put into making the synchro replace themselves immediately. Because you send like Wolf or Felis, you can't send Wolf and Felis because they have the same type. But you can send Wolf or Felis, which comes out to the field, and then you can send Vice, which is the other new Lightsworn main deck monster, which when it's sent from deck to the graveyard, reborns a Lightsworn, right? And so you put 2 bodies into making the level 8 synchro, and then you get the 2 bodies right back. And then it has another effect which says you can banish up to 4 Lightsworns from your graveyard to mill that many cards. So essentially, this thing is a level 8 synchro that creates 2 level 4 monsters on the field and mills 4 cards. So it's very, very close to something like a Magic ruler, but it's only exclusive to Lightsworn. You have no way to really use it in another deck because both of its effects are tied to Lightsworn effects, Lightsworn monsters, essentially.
Yeah, good breakdown. Further than that as well, the important and cool thing that you mentioned is the searching of the Judgment Dragon that you can do with the Dragon Link. But
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, a card that hasn't actually been played ever really at the competitive level is Punishment Dragon. It's
Yeah.
part of the Twilight Sworn sort of mirror of the Light Sworn archetype, which
Mm-hmm.
requires banished Light Sworns rather than the Grave summoning activation, summoning requirement. And it's very interesting as well because it has a really good effect that you can end on. But I think generally what
Yep.
you want to do with this deck is Minerva's really cool because it helps you get to a rank 8.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the few ways that this deck can actually play under or play around Nibiru is because you have access to Photon Lord. You just get your mills off with your Minerva, and then you can summon the Punishment or the JD, and then
Yep.
you can make a Photon Lord, or if you want to get it twisted, you can keep going and make Zombie Vampire.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dragonling, because it both summons the Minerva and searches the Punishment or Judgment Dragon, is basically a 1-card rank 8 Xyz. If you want to go that route, yeah.
So
And then Vice, just for completion's sake, Vice has another effect. Obviously, not just the graveyard effect, but also when it's in hand, you can put another Lightsworn from your hand on top of the deck. Then it summons itself as a level 4 tuner and mills 2 cards, which is a good way to get Wolves and Fellis out of your hand because they're going to be on top of your deck. Then you summon the Vice and then you mill it guaranteed. And you have a level 4 tuner that summons itself from the hand. And then there's a trap card that is like kind of just okay. It's like it like negates cards up to the number of lights ones you control, and when you mill it, you can set it. But yeah, it's a trap card at the end of the day. But I've seen some people mess around with it because if you mill a lot, it's just going to be free.
I think that's the cool part about Aegis is that, yeah, like it's a card that you probably will get milling if you're already playing. It's obviously terrible to draw, but it's just a nice little bonus because there isn't really like a ton of stuff that's like good to mill unless you want to go like super high rolly and start playing like tier element and stuff in your deck. But I've personally been playing Max Reynolds' list. If you've seen his list around by any chance.
I haven't. No. What?
So it's like
describe it to me.
So it's got a Horus engine.
Mm-hmm.
Which feels pretty standard across most Lightsworn lists, unless you're playing budget, of course, which you can kind of play budget Lightsworn. And it's also playing dragons. You got Sephiroths, you got Bestials, you got Lebellion.
Okay.
And
yeah, that sounds very fun. The Bestial cards have great synergy with the Lightsworn cards because it's obviously level 6 plus level 4 is historically one of the best pairings, even though you don't have Baron anymore. But with the Bestials, you can obviously make a very easy Dispatter, which is a very good replacement.
This is why I was mentioning that, because you bring up this pattern. It's like we play the deck very differently because you make Omega, you loop a card, you Dispatter, bring back Omega, you vanish another card, you summon Levianeer, and you loop another card. Like, so we are definitely on very different ways of playing this deck. It's awful. It's horrible.
Well, you say this, but outside of the Levianeer, I've been doing the same thing.
Wow. You're okay.
Because what I played at locals, I won my locals with it. I've and non-tuner bodies, and they mill a lot of cards, so you always have a bunch of runics, so your fountain always draws 3, even if you don't draw that many runics. And then
hold, pause 1 second. This is gonna feel really bad in the podcast if you're listening now. Can you go back and explain your local story? Because I just had a small F there, unfortunately.
Oh, are we still live?
Yeah, we're still good. We're still good. It was just like a drop for a second.
Okay, so where did I cut off? Where do I start?
The Lightsworn Runic part again. Start from there.
Okay, so the idea with Lightsworn Runic was you have the Lightsworns, which give you level 4 bodies, tuners and non-tuners, and like you play Charge and Solar Recharge and all the Lightsworn milling effects. So you load your graveyard up with a lot of runics, and so that means your fountain always draws 3 very consistently, even if you don't draw that many runics. And then you use the Hugin to go into synchros with the level 4s. Obviously, you make the good old like Coral Dragon and all that. And I've also been doing, because Dragonling is a dragon non-tuner, I've been doing like Coral Dragon plus Dragonling makes this pattern, and then level 4 plus level 4 makes Omega. Then you can rip 2 cards out of their hand and have like Fountain, this pattern, a bunch of runics, and then whatever else you can set up. So I've been doing the Spatter and Omega thing with the deck as well. Even though there's probably other ways you can use it. For example, I have not been playing Punishment or Judgment Dragon, so I haven't been making any rank 8s, which I think maybe you should, and all that kind of stuff. I just threw it together and thought it was very, very fun.
Hey, Josh, I knew you were degenerate at heart. If you want to go further than that, this list is also playing Infernal Flame Banshee as 2 generic level 4 monsters. You can just search the recently brought back from the list Thunder Dragon Colossus. So you can go Banshee, add a Pyro, which is flag, special flag, put back one of your banished guys, which you do a lot in this deck, and then flag gets you Corridor. Corridor is now a Thunder that activates from the hand, which means it summons itself from free by returning a banished card, and you link it away into Colossus.
See, this is where I would tell you guys to not do this, but if I say that, people are going to be mad in the comments for like me playing Runic, but then saying don't do that, and that's cringe.
I think this is like one of the best quote unquote results we had was like basically just winning like a case tournament, which is like fine. I don't think so. Just as a caveat, I don't think Lightsworn is probably going to be a good deck this format, not without another big ban list. It needs too many cards to really play. You need like two or three cards to keep
Mhm.
playing, and you compare that to like a bonfire. It's just not on the same level, right? It's just
It's yeah. I would say I do think the when I played it, it felt like a good deck, similar to how other decks in the format feel good. Like when I'm playing Voiceless Voice, it feels like a good deck, or I don't know other examples. They just don't feel this. They're it's not Snake Eyes. Like it's legit that like no matter what I play, even if it's a good deck that can definitely I think top a regional. Like no matter which version of Lightsworn you build, there's probably a lot of potential out there to combine it with different stuff, and you can probably make it work. You can probably make it top a regional, maybe even top a YCS or nationals or whatever. It's still not going to be as good as a Snake Eye deck. Like there's just no way, or I hope there's no way they make decks that are actually better than Snake Eyes before that stuff gets hit on the ban list. Because I'm scared of what kind of deck they would make that's actually better than what one Snake Eye Ash does. So yeah.
who really knows? You never know, right? I mean, we thought Tier Limit would be the peak, but actually, to be fair, you could probably say like Tier is the peak, right? I don't think we've had something bigger than or more powerful than that. Um, but yeah, Lightsworn, it's good. It's obviously the problem is like the format is in a state where Snake Eye exists, and Snake Eye is just too good at what it does. And I think that's realistically the big problem. But yeah, fun deck, and it is possible to build in budget ways. I think runics are also cheap as well if you want to play
The
the
runic
version.
portion is the budget part. It is unfortunate, but I guess it's worth mentioning that a lot of the ultra rares from this set that are interesting are relatively expensive, and that also goes for Lightsworn Dragonling. I don't know what it's at exactly right now, but I think it's gone up significantly since release. I think the simple reason for that is that this set, in terms of its secret rares, it really doesn't have much going on for it. Like there's just not much that has any value because they decided to. I think it's like four secret rares for this anime shining sarcophagus archetype or whatever, and like most of the secrets are actually not that great, and so a lot of the value in the set is actually on the ultra rares like Lightsworn Dragonling and also the Ubel Ultra, which we're going to talk about in a second. Those are for I think for that reason relatively expensive because those are like the chase cards in the set
Dude,
rather than
I
the
was
secrets.
like, I was just googling this as you were saying this, and like, I swear to God, last night I was like, oh yeah, I'll pick them up in the morning. I think they were like £12 last night. I think they've been bought out or something. They've like doubled
What
overnight.
Dragonlings?
Yeah, like what the?
What is it now?
It's like the lowest is like for UK, it's like £22 lowest.
Yeah, that's
That
unfortunate. Yeah, yeah.
that's
I picked
what?
them up. I picked them up right at release date because I knew I was gonna play it at locals. But
God
yeah,
damn it. Well, I got
rare
three
Josh
boxes.
Market W.
Market watch with Josh. I got some boxes next to me. I might just crack them open at this point and
Just pull
like
the Dragon Links. Yeah,
just
just pull
pull
them.
them. All right. All good on Lightsworn.
Yeah, all good on Lightsworn.
Where do you which deck would you like to bring up next?
I guess let's do Ubel because I just mentioned that they got a new field spell, Nightmare Throne, and some other interesting support cards in the super rare section. I believe is what they are. It's like the new Grave Squirmer, or is that in the old set? I don't know which one is new.
Gruesome Grave
Um,
Squirmer is Legacy Destruction.
yes. Okay. Yeah. And the Ubel, I've been getting a ton of questions about like what do you think of Ubel? Is it going to be good or is it not going to be good? And I've also seen deck profiles from last weekend where people have been topping regionals with a unchained Ubel sort of deck because the reality is people call it Ubel and it has a lot of Ubel cards, but it's basically a Fiend Link pile. It's kind of like the equivalent for Dragon Link with Fiends, but the Ubel package is like really strong in it. But it played like the Unchained cards to go into Yama. It played the level 2 Dark Beckoning Beast stuff that you used to play in sprites just to get level 2s on the board. Now you play it because like a lot in the deck is zero attack fiends. And you want to make like Yama and all that kind of stuff. Or if you already have combo, you can make like Jin Buster to play around hand traps. All that kind of stuff. The deck is very cool, I feel like, and it is decent. But I would say that I don't think it's going to be top tier until we get the Ubel fusion monster. Not the Loving Defender. I'm aware we already have that, but there's another one coming up that's like a free. I think it's a free graveyard fusion, like Vicious Astrolaud for Manadium. That card, we don't have a set release date for it yet because it came out, I think, as like some promo in Japan. But we are probably getting it somewhat soon. That would make sense. When we get that card, I think the deck is going to be real. Like that deck is putting up numbers in the OCG right now. I saw a OCG metagame report yesterday on stream where that deck had more representation in top cuts than Snake Eyes throughout like a bunch of tournaments.
In terms of recent results, like Yubel is, I mean, OCG is like fairly equal in its distribution. Snake
Yeah.
Eye is like ahead, but there's like a
Slightly, yeah.
significant there's like a significant portion dedicated to like Tenpai, then Yubel, then like Voiceless.
Yeah.
So it's like
I think
relatively.
that's impressive. Like the fact that this deck is able to compete in an environment where it's like Tenpai and Snake Eye, I feel like says a lot about the deck. Like I would have never guessed that when I saw like them slowly starting to make Bell support. Like that deck ever competing with some like Snake Eye, I would have never thought that could happen. But it appears like it is a very very strong deck. Although I haven't played it myself yet. Like I want to caveat it with that is one of the decks where I've only theoretically looked at it. I haven't actually tried it myself. So but the fusion monster they're still getting is absolutely crazy. So I'm not surprised.
It's Phantom, correct? Is the name?
So they all have like Spirit of Ubel. I think is the main deck monster that they already got. I think it's Phantom of Ubel. Yeah.
Okay. So it must be special from the extra by shuffling the materials. So you contact fuse it. It can be used as fusion material, and it can be destroyed by battle, and you take no battle damage. When your opponent activates a monster effect, tribute this, and the effect becomes your opponent destroys a Yubel in their hand, deck, or field. Wow.
So it's basically because you shuffle from grave as well, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it's a free summon by recycling materials from the graveyard, and it's not just a free summon, but it's also essentially an Omni Negate.
Yep, that also
Because
triggers
it's like
your Yubel. Is that relevant?
it works like the Dark World one where it like changes your opponent's effect into something that's beneficial for you. So it's like
is it good
very,
to
very
destroy
good.
Yubel in your deck? Like, because I know like the whole gimmick of Yubel is that it climbs up into Ultimate Nightmare and all that. So you're not.
Yeah, I
doing
mean it's
that
good for you.
stuff.
You just pop the OG level 10 Ubel probably, and then it triggers into the bigger one, right? So
Oh wow.
pretty good.
Okay. We are just playing that. That's
Yeah,
impressive.
they play I think they don't play stage 3 most of the time. But they definitely play stage 2.
Interesting. Well, that's it's pretty cool as well because conceptually, I just love seeing like an anime deck like this because it's supposed to. I would hope that someone who like is like a fan of this might potentially be someone who kind of takes that jump into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh because realizing that a deck or a character or a series that they really liked specifically actually has a viable strategy.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's like a very positive thing overall.
Yeah, I don't see how it would ever be negative. I mean, I personally I don't care that much if the archetype that I'm playing is from the anime or just completely made up from like for the sets, but like I think it can only really be a positive if someone enters the game because I don't know, their favorite deck from the anime is now a meta deck. I think it's yeah, probably a net positive.
All right. So as it stands right now, just based off of the way that this deck plays, and to be admittedly the minimal amount of like feature matches and stuff, it feels like that is like probably quite an important aspect of the deck, right? Is the Phantom. But right now it's like a fiend pile, as you mentioned. But what does it really like end on? Like, does it have the power to like make Apollouzas and stuff, or is it just like SP plus hand
I
traps, or
don't
how do you actually play it?
I think a big part of it is they make like unchained cards to end on. Like they still
Okay.
go for a rage and Yama in the grave and stuff like that. The Ubel cards itself have crazy synergy
So it's kind of
with
like
the
more of a like an unchained strategy, and it's more of like a
it does the Ubel stuff itself. You can easily summon I think the new rank 10 monster, which is also in this set, which is also a very good card. Which is basically 2 level 10s for an Omni Negate, which is kind of like a more balanced version of Baron, which is still very powerful. But it's basically 2 level 10s once per turn. When your opponent activates a card, you can detach one material to negate it, but not destroy. But you can detach one more material to destroy any card on the field. So like let's say your opponent
Whoa.
has a monster and activates a spell card you want to negate. You can detach 2 to negate the spell card and pop the monster.
Do you not think that's better than Yubel? Sorry, Baron?
It's the effect is better than Baron, but
It's
having
harder to
to
make.
overlay
Yeah.
2 level 10s is way harder than summoning a level 10 synchro.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, it is extremely powerful though. Maybe Earth Machine players have been eating good tonight. I don't know.
It's not an Earth.
I was level 10, right? Rank 10. So
It
it's
is rank 10. Yes,
yeah.
it's rank 10.
Okay. Yeah, it seems pretty
Yeah,
cool.
so that's another good card that's definitely worth mentioning. Then I guess stuff that's a little bit faster to go over is Voiceless Voice have gotten one new relevant card, which is the new continuous spell, which lets you ritual summon on the opponent's turn, and it gives you recursion for all of your voiceless cards, which is something they didn't have. I think it's once per turn, add a voiceless voice card from grave or banished, and that's pretty good. Is usually only being played as a one of because it doesn't start your plays, but it's a pretty good like recursive tool for the deck to have. And so not much changes for voiceless voice, but the deck does get significantly better by putting that one card in. The other new voiceless cards I don't think are make the cut,
Yeah,
even though
did
they're
they
not
get a new
terrible.
Saphira? That's
There's a new Saphira. Yeah, there's a new Saphira, but it is I would not expect them to actually play that. Even though it's not a terrible card, but it's just not Skull Guardian. You know, Skull Guardian is like you would always rather go for Skull Guardian, and I think even the OG Saravis is probably better because it's got good utility whether it's in hand or on the field. So I just don't think the new Saphira is going to have great impact. But I think that's okay. I think Voiceless is in a fine spot already. You know, I don't think the deck needed something crazy out of this set.
Do you want to move on to Melodious?
Yes, people in chat have been spamming Melodious. Melodious had kind of a strong performance last weekend. It's been popping up here and there in a decent amount. There's decks that can use Melodious as an engine. And
Yeah.
there's like the pure Melodious deck. But I think I learned yesterday or 2 days ago that Melodious has a branded fusion.
Yes.
Well, I knew
So
they had a branded fusion, but I learned yesterday when I watched the deck profile that the branded fusion is not once per turn.
yeah. So to give you a little rundown on how this deck works, Melodious, because I did do a bit of a deep dive on stream at some point. It's interesting because the new support cards are pendulum monsters.
Mm-hmm. Is that the first? Is that a first for Melodious?
I think they have maybe like one or two, but you definitely
Okay.
never like actually did pendulum summoning. So there's two ways to really approach it. You can play like pure Melodious, or you can play it as like sort of like a little bit of an engine, kind of like how Super Heavy used to use their pen stuff. So as part of your combo, it is like a one card combo that ends on like 3 disruptions. Like I think the card you mentioned, the Ostinato, just by itself, I think ends on like Apollosa, Scales, and like an IP or something like that, or one other kind of disruption.
Whoa, those are very cool Melodious cards.
It really is just like exactly as you would imagine, right? Like it contributes like so much of its combo just via the extra deck, right? And who knows how worse it could have been if certain other cards stayed in the game. But the new pendulum monsters are basically like really good like starter cards that also have multiple effects, like on the field, in the grave, and like in the scale. It's exactly how you'd expect like a new support to work for a rogue deck, right? Like you literally just make it super busted by giving it like 3 separate effects on each portion here. And I think a lot of people have been really pleased with this because, well, who knows for the actual playstyle. It's probably one of the closer budget decks of the format, and one of the options you could explore.
You said this, but then I thought the same thing, but then I realized they have like another card that is like I don't know if it's a Rhoda or
it's one card, to be fair, that you could
first movement
arguably
solo.
Yeah, you could arguably like maybe not play this because
okay.
it's, I mean, a lot of people will probably say that's unethical, but it's like an e-telly for like two, I think, or it's a one card combo, right? But the problem is that it completely locks you to Melodious monsters for the turn.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so some people are actually like not playing it.
Okay.
But yeah, first movement solo is an old card. I think it's from, where is it? See here. Wow, that is old. That is the set
Yeah.
with Farfa in it. That's 2014. This is an old ass card.
Yeah,
Um,
Melodious is an old ass archetype.
it is freaking old. Okay. But yeah, it's I think it's like $30 or something per copy now.
Yeah,
It's
that's crazy.
yeah. Um so if you do want to play like pure Melodious, you will probably have to play first movement solo.
And that especially sucks because all of the Melodious cards are giga cheap, especially in the new set. I don't even know if they have a holo. I think one of them is like super rare, the fusion.
Yeah, they have
Like
like a really
that deck
cool new
would be
fusion.
so cheap if they had just reprinted that card like semi at the right time. But yeah,
One of their cool boss monsters that they got recently, a Twal here. I've got it up on my screen here. Yeah, it's actually a super. It's a quick effect banish until the end phase, and any number of Melodious you control, up to number of Melodious you control, you return that many face-up cards your opponent controls. So you can like bounce like 2 or 3 cards your opponent has.
mm,
It's pretty sick.
yeah,
And Basha as well, I think is how you get to it. It's just two Melodious monsters. I think this is what the branded fusion makes. While they control the
yeah,
fusion summon card, the activate effects of Melodiouses can't be negated. You can only use effect once per turn. If this is special, you special a Melodious from your deck. And if it's sent to the grave, you target a Melodious and then bring it back. So you just get a guy out your deck, and then you make another guy, and then it brings back a guy, and then it just has like all of this like climbing power associated with it. So that's why
yeah.
Ostinato is so strong. And yeah, it's not once per turn.
So
So the Ash,
Ostinato does not lock you into Melodious, right?
yeah. Uh,
Okay, that's crazy.
so you basically just ostinato, and if they ash it, you can do it again.
Yeah, that's what they said in the deck profile. They were like, I'm playing Thrust so that when they like ash my Ostinato, I can just grab another one or something. And I was like, what? You can't do that?
Yep. They decided that branded fusion wasn't strong enough, so they
No.
made it again and just gave it no restrictions.
To be fair, if it's specifically a deck like Melodious that can have it, I'm honestly I'm not too mad about it as long as people stick with, I don't know. I'm kind of fine with the idea of people playing like pure Melodious and being restricted to Melodious cards if they play like first movement solo and all that kind of stuff. That's fine in my book. It just feels like it should have been the Ostinato that had that restriction.
It is
But
weird, isn't it? But
yeah.
yeah, I think you ostinato and you like send the penned monsters, I believe, and then they like have trigger effects in the grave, and
Yeah,
then you
I
can
think
like,
they scale themselves when
yeah, they can like rescale
or
themselves,
something.
and then you can like pen summon and then make more stuff. So the
Yeah.
deck is like kind of like a combo deck. I'm not sure how hard it is to play. It might have a couple of linear lines, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
very 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 low rarity. Pretty easy to put together. Again, it's just like
Yeah.
first movement solo is kind of like the expensive
Yeah.
card. So
And I do think overall that's a theme with this set. Because it is a set that on the one hand it doesn't have anything crazy completely meta breaking. I mean, the closest is Tenpai, but like overall a lot of this stuff is just kind of like little add-ons to existing decks, nothing completely absurd. And from in terms of rarity distribution, I think it's a complete opposite of what happened with like Snake Eyes, where like a lot of the stuff that they could have easily made ultra or secret, they decided to make common or super, maybe because of the backlash from this what happened with Snake Eyes. They decided to do like the opposite, and I think it feels good, like the ability to pick up a bunch of different stuff from this set, for new decks or for old decks, and without it being like complete, like $1,000 down the drain or whatever, is pretty cool. I kind of like, I liked picking up, like when I picked up the Lightsworn stuff, it was like, I don't know, like $30 for all of it, and I just like had a core for something that I could use, and so on and so forth. I thought it was pretty nice.
yeah, so the biggest issue I think is like it's this weird paradox because when a set is so when the high rarity cards just aren't chase cards, then the
Yeah,
set becomes kind of cheap, which is bad for stores.
yeah,
But it's also good for players. So it's this weird paradox because you need stores for the players to actually play and survive, but
yeah.
then the players don't want to pay like thousands for a deck. So You
I
know,
think the
well,
reality is like that they need to kind of be better at finding like the sweet spot. Like they need to make it like a little bit better for vendors than what Legacy of Destruction is, but we definitely can't go to what like Phantom Nightmare was. No, not Phantom Nightmare. The one before that, the Wanted and all that. I even forgot.
Age of
Age of
Overlords.
Overlord, like that kind of stuff, right? Because that set I know was very, very good for vendors, right? But not very good for the wallets of the community and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I guess it's a thing of where like some sets are good for us, some sets are bad for us, some sets are good for the vendors, some sets are bad for the vendors, and overall maybe it balances out, or they get better at finding like a sweet spot for it. I don't know.
There's a couple of archetypes left, and then we can maybe bring up individual cards that
Yes.
are interesting. So I'm going to be honest, I have not looked into this one in a while. I barely remember how they work. Ragnarika?
Yeah, so I learned that it's a plant link combo deck, and so
Stop there.
I am not interested in this deck whatsoever. I kind of hope it sucks. Although
You will
I
be happy
will
to know that
say
it isn't very good.
it kind of felt cool when I read it for the first time. Like it's like a link climbing deck.
Is that
That
cool?
I think if people would play it in its pure form, it would be kind of cool. However, I'm kind of afraid that it's just going to be used as like people are going to pick like the one or two best cards and play them in other decks to make their link climbing combos stronger. That's what I'm scared of. As for the deck itself, it doesn't feel that great. It doesn't feel terrible either, but yeah.
So Ragnarika is like it feels very similar in its style to Tri Brigade. It uses these tri types of plant,
Mhm.
reptile, and insect. I think is the other one. Yeah,
Yes, it's plant, reptile, insect, tri brigade essentially.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it does a bunch of banishing and link climbing via those attributes, those types, and
Yeah.
that's really kind of all I really know about it. It's not been on the radar whatsoever, and I don't think it's
Yeah.
had any tops yet. So hopefully there'll be more cooking to be done with this because it feels like there is a lot of potential here, and it's just a question of like, can anyone actually take it over the finish line? Because as it stands now, it really hasn't done much, and we have the cheat sheet, which is the OCG, and I don't think this deck ever did anything over there either.
It didn't, and it's not surprising because when you read the cards for the first time, you immediately realize, yeah, this deck is like kind of mid-range in what it does, but it completely dies to maxi. So you would never really expect the OCG to play this deck, which is why you can maybe attest it a little bit more potential in the TCG than it would have in the OCG. But I haven't looked into it in that much detail yet. It's not the archetype out of the set that I had the most interest for. Maybe at some point, but I wouldn't be too surprised if it had more potential in the TCG. I'll say that. So like if you want to look into it, it could be worth it.
In terms of other archetypes, I think there was like one or two Valmonica cards. Um,
Yeah,
but again, I don't
noted.
think we've seen too much here. Any specific cards you want to bring up?
The Centurion cards are solid. It's a shame that the deck still is essentially Calamity Turbo for us because that card is not banned yet for some reason. But the new Synchro 12 is quite nice because it's kind of like an alternative to Legacia, where it's a generic level 12. And instead of drawing a card like Legacia does, it adds a Centurion card. What that does for the deck, for pure Centurion, it doesn't do that much because Legacia was already good. But I think it does something interesting where I think you can play Centurion in other decks now, and you don't have to draw. Like you can play like a small Centurion package as your deck, as long as your deck can make a level 12 synchro, you can grab your Centurion card, whichever one you need. And so you could theoretically, it makes the deck more splashable, which I think is cool. And I've been a big fan of the Centurion cards outside of Calamity. Like it's kind of it's one of those cases where I like the deck's playstyle and I like what the cards do. But I just hate that they are completely tied to Calamity at the moment. But the new cards are helpful for it.
Yeah, that's what you mentioned right there is that it becomes splashable now because of the new synchro Auxilla. It's a 12 generic synchro,
Yeah.
and I think like I believe I saw someone playing. I think it was Jesse actually. He was playing this engine in Lightsworn because you can make 12 synchros.
Yeah, you could do that.
And then yeah, you just make Auxilla, and then that furthers your plays. So that's Pretty neat way that he's been using that.
Yeah.
Any other cards?
So I think even though this card hasn't had impact, I think it's fair to say that Nightmare Apprentice is probably the best standalone card in the set. Out of all out of the entire set. It's a secret rare. It's a level 6, and it says you can special summon it from your hand by discarding any card. And it has the normal illusion effect where it can't die by battle and can't kill anything by battle. And it's just, if it's normal or special, it adds an illusion from your deck to your hand.
This is one of
So
those cards that like you get now. So
that's
I
the
am
thing, right? That this card literally, as long as unless they never make a single good illusion card again, that card has to be good, right? Like
yep.
this card, a card from your hand, summon a level 6 body, no locks with it at all, and adds any illusion from your deck to your hand. That card has to be good at some point, right? Like that card is just too versatile and too powerful for it not to see play at any point. Like at some point, some deck is gonna have a good illusion starter card or good illusion extender, and on top of that, maybe have good discards, and then that card is just going to be phenomenal, right? That card is just good, and that's worth pointing out. I don't know what the price point for the card is at the moment. It is a secret rare, and I think people are aware that it's a good card. There's just no place to put it. But the vibes that this card gives me is very similar to what I felt when I saw Zelantis for the first time, for example, right? Like I saw Zelantis and I was like, okay, there's no place for this card right now. And as a result, Zelantis was relatively cheap. But like everyone knew, like at some point, at some point that interaction is going to be broken, right? And I think it's the same with Nightmare Apprentice, especially since illusion is still a relatively new type. Eventually, we're going to get a good illusion deck. We already had Chimera, which was kind of close, and that deck is that any good illusion deck is going to play Nightmare Apprentice, I think.
Yeah, it's the beauty of the open-endedness when
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh just keeps printing more and more cards, right? Like that's what happened exactly with Performa Pal and Perform Mages, if you guys remember, however long ago that was. Surely they will never make a good Pendulum cards. And then Link Monsters happened, and we had the exact same situation with the Link mechanic, and you just know that something is going to be made at some point, and an entire type not being good. I mean, I don't know.
That's a tough bet, like I think you're on the safer end if you bet that. The other, I guess the only thing is maybe Nightmare Apprentice is reprinted by then because the Broken Illusion archetype happens after, I don't know, the next year's Mega Tins or whatever, and then
I wanted to bring up Ashend a little bit, I suppose, since that was kind of a big one. So Ashend has gotten its second wave of support in this set.
Yep.
I'm gonna be honest and just come out and say, like, flat out, this is really like disappointing. Like it was super sad
Okay.
reading these cards. The deck is just not very good. It needed more. And
I agree. I agree with the fact that it's probably not good and needed more. I personally, the way I feel about these cards is a little bit different because I don't feel disappointed by them because I do think the cards that they got were cool, and good as well. Like they got good cards. It's just a matter of if you limit yourself to only creating 14 cards for a new archetype, it's just incredibly difficult to make that one actually playable, especially when you give them like a gimmick like a fusion summon or whatever, right? Like the way that they were like, okay, we only have 14 slots available, but we're gonna give them 2 different fusions and some fusion related cards, and that's just not gonna cut it, right? Because I think Ashen, compared to other TCG exclusive archetypes in the past, has a higher density of actually good cards in its 14. Like there's not many Ashen cards that are straight up garbage in these 14. There's like 2, I
I don't know.
think.
I don't feel like quantity is the issue here. I'm gonna have to disagree with that. I think the
Okay.
issue is like the quality of the cards just like really are not that great, right? Like let's look at, for example, Embers of the Ashen, right? Like this is just 2 pyros, right? You compare that to Kikalos, which is just like a tier and an aqua.
Okay.
They are
Yeah,
so
all right.
but like that's the thing, right? Like that obviously we're talking like purely from a competitive perspective. Like if we want these decks to be good and we want them to be powerful, they have to have like super powerful effects, right? Because what is the alternative, right? Otherwise they just become like cool fun decks, which is fine to some extent.
Yeah.
But this keeps
I
happening
mean,
with world
what
premieres.
I meant was the Ashen cards for the most part. I think most of them make sense. Like it's like you read some of the Tistina cards and you're like, how would this card ever see play? How would that ever be good? Even if Tistina was a good deck, I wouldn't put this card in it, right? With the Ashen cards, it's like if Ashen was a good deck, I would play most of those cards in it. It's just because we only have those,
Hmm.
I'm not yet willing to play the deck. But if I was playing the deck, I would be playing those cards. I would be playing the new spell card. I would be playing Vados. I would be playing the one of the Vados traps. Probably, I'd be playing most of the main deck monsters. Like the cards are fine. They're not terrible cards, but it's just like it's not quite enough. It's not quite there. And I believe the issue there is that they made it too gimmicky, right? If instead of focusing on giving us extra deck monsters or whatever, they focused on giving us more like main deck material, I think it could have worked out. But they just decided to get a little too cute with it, with the giving your opponent Vados and fusing with it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like to tell you the truth, like I like after all of these cards, I'm still kind of struggling to see like what actually is your win condition in this deck. Like it feels like it's supposed to be like that big
Well,
the
the
fusion
main
Vados.
combo that they're trying to do is you want to give your opponent Vados, and then you want to fuse into the new ultra rare Vados fusion, which Vados blows up their monsters, and the fusion blows up their spell trap. So it's a complete board wipe.
Yeah. Okay. And that is like definitely like a 3+ card combo, isn't it?
I think the deck has one card combos. I think Priestess does one card combos, but I'm not sure if it gets you to the entire setup.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny, yeah, because like you look at like Prank Kids, like Prank Kids kind of just did that with like one card, right? Like that's
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to tell you the deck is actually good. I'm just saying like I'm not as disappointed as I am in other TCG archetypes because it's like the deck has a functioning concept and the deck actually has some decent cards. It's just not quite enough. But
Personally, I'm at a point where
it's
the TCG exclusive stuff, I just feel like is the bar is so low that
yeah,
I'm
that's
not
fair.
I'm never really like mega disappointed. It's just I was particularly hyped because the artwork is just so goddamn
Exactly.
good.
That's what it is, right? Because like it's the type of thing where you're like, you swear to yourself, you're like, I'm never gonna believe in it. I'm never gonna get on that copium with a TCG exclusive archetype again, right? I've been disappointed over and over and over and over and over again. How can I fall for it again? And then it's like the Ashen card. They look so cool though. The first wave drops, and you're like, oh my god, this time for real. They spent so much money on like
The
creating that
assets,
trailer and
the
all that,
trailer, yeah.
surely this time, right? And it's like, oh man. But it is the kind of archetype where I think it's more salvageable than others. Like it's like it's more salvageable than like Goatee or Tistina, where it's like if the OCG takes
Whoa,
over and actually makes does what the OCG does, potentially.
that Goaty drive by, dude. I think Goaty's better than Ashen personally.
Well, after the OCG support, yeah. But that's not
Like
fair.
the Phantom Nightmare stuff, or
Yeah.
the oh okay.
I don't think Goatee pre OCG support was better than Ashen.
I think the interesting thing about Goatee is that there's like so much good like water like support and stuff you can play with Goatee. I don't really think
Mm-hmm.
you can mix Ashen with much, really. That's kind of
It
the
mixes
problem.
with Bonfire.
Okay. Uh, fair. Um,
I don't know. Maybe it's also just I like Vados. I think Vados is going to be good at some point.
that's like the crazy thing about Vados specifically. Like, it's I
Yeah.
don't think Ashen is very good, but like as a generic like staple, like I was just thinking like, oh, this feels like we haven't had a hand trap printed in a while, and it's like, well, field spell hand trap like that could be super sick, right? I mean, hell, could you play this against Tenpai?
It is good against Tenpai.
Yeah, there you go. Like,
It's always going to be a matter of our field spell popular enough so that you want to put Vados in your deck because it is kind of specific in that sense.
Hmm.
But I do think the card is good. I think Vados is a good card.
Okay. Do you want to talk about a little about the sort of like the metagame, or bring up a couple more
I
cards?
mean, I feel like we have mentioned most of it already, but as a brief overview, I think that does it. I think we've talked about most of the, or like all of the stuff that's interesting. I guess one quick thing before we move on. Another card is Metal Tronus. I don't know if you are familiar.
Metotronus. No, what is this?
I'm looking through the list right now. I think
Let's
I've
see.
scrolled
This
past it like two
is
times.
a quick play spell that targets a face-up non-token your opponent
Yes.
controls. Special a monster from your hand, deck, or extra that has two or more of the same type, attribute, and/or attack, but negate it. And if you do, negate that targeted monster's effects. Also, after that, if these monsters have the same name, you can banish both face down, and your opponent can activate the target monster in response to this. So I do remember reading this now that
Mm-hmm.
I've read it again. That's it's like a go second type of removal that also has really kind of powerful synergies if you're playing a mirror match, right? Like,
I think it's particularly interesting because it is not specifically for going second, because it is a quick play spell, so you can use it as like
oh
an
yeah, yeah, you can.
impermanence kind of card, as long as you have cards in your deck that share enough types and attributes with your opponents. Like,
Two
because
or
you don't
more,
have to
yeah.
summon the exact same card. You don't like, you can negate a Rhino Heart, even without playing tier limits yourself. For example, like if you play, as long as you play like a warrior with 1500 attack, or a water monster with 1500 attack, or whatever, right? But the interesting thing about this is you get to decide, do I want to summon the exact same thing, right? Because one thing that people mentioned, obviously, when this card was released, like, oh well, you can like negate your opponent's Baron, for example, if you play Baron yourself. You can negate Savage if you play Savage yourself. Obviously, those cards are now banned. But for example, something like, if you're playing Dragon Link, the ability to negate your opponent's Dispatter and summon your own any dark dragon from your deck, and just saying like, hey, I'll decide to keep them both around because yours is negated anyways. Like, I'll just summon like my Router and negate your Dispatter. I think that's a solid card, and I think it's a little bit dependent, obviously, on the format, on what kind of attributes and types are around. But I think it's a pretty cool card. Like, you can like literally summon, you can negate SP Little Knight and summon any Dark Warrior from your deck. Like, that's a powerful interaction.
Seems like one of those small world cards where it's completely database, related. You
Yeah,
you gotta have one of those like brains to
yeah,
truly come up with, because there is like a lot of potential here, and it's which is why it's such a cool card,
yeah.
because your ability to like find something that is going to be good to summon out of your deck based off of the
Hmm.
current format's typing and attributes
Yeah,
is a huge deck building advantage that you could potentially find with this card.
yeah,
Um, but will we find it? I suppose we'll see, right? But
yeah.
yeah, it definitely does seem really, really cool.
Yeah, that was just the one thing I wanted to bring up before we move on, because like, I think obviously there's probably other stuff that's interesting. You guys can let us know in like the comments what you are specifically looking forward to, or anything we may have missed, because we simply don't have the time to talk about all what is it, 100 cards one by one. But those are definitely the ones that I am the most interested in. In terms of the results from the first week, we've already talked about Tenpai. I've already mentioned Ubel earlier. But I think for the most part, outside of myself playing Lightsworns, and people adding one of the spell in Voiceless Voice, I'm not sure how much actually happened.
I was just trying to find the Ubel list from this past weekend that did like okay. I think there was is this a regional? Yeah, there was a second place regional deck.
Yes, it's a second place. It was like Fort Worth, Texas.
Yeah, and it's obviously we don't have the Phantom card, but it is playing the new rank 10, which
Yes.
is so formidable in and of itself. And you can take advantage with Super Poly, it looks like.
Yeah, no, it's because the Ubel fusion says Ubel plus all the monsters on the field.
Yeah. Plus
Or like one
one
plus,
plus
it's literally the meme of one plus effect monster on the field.
yeah.
You can just super poly all of your opponent's stuff as long as you have Ubel. That's kind of the gimmick of the deck. Because the trap also lets you do that. The trap says you can use your opponent's monsters as material as well, and you just use Ubel plus all of their monsters.
Yeah. In terms of its win con, it feels like it's basically setting that up, and then all of your generic link stuff that you would
Yeah, it's like a mix
play.
of, make the rank 10, fuse with your opponent's stuff, maybe draw a super poly, maybe draw some hand traps, maybe make some unchained links. That it's like a mishmash of that stuff.
We could maybe I don't know how much time you want to keep going for. But there was the Greek Open. I think that was Legacy of Destruction format, wasn't it?
Yes, the Greek Open was won by Tenpai, as far as I know.
Yeah.
But there
Which
was a Buster Blader in the finals.
uh, a deck that has gotten no support. I want to say. Like, was there anything unique about it?
Well, no, it hasn't. It was basically. I can send you the link of the list. Hold up, so you can look at it. I have it open.
Because the Buster Blader win condition, as far as I'm aware, has been the same for many years now.
It's very cringe. Yes. so it's basically this is just Dragon Link with some traps and a Horus engine, and the Buster Blader cards, which I think it relies on the trap cards. That's why there's like Trap Trick. But the idea is, I think you summon the Buster Blader fusion monster, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, which says all dragons your opponent controls are changed to defense, and also dragon types your opponent in your opponent's possession can't activate their effects. And then you make Buster Dragon, which is a synchro, which is I think summoned by the trap card. Yes. And Buster Dragon is a level 8 synchro that says all of your opponent's monsters become dragon. So the win condition is essentially making all of your opponent's monsters dragon, and then because you have the fusion monster, they're all changed to defense position and can't activate their effects.
It's really hilarious because like the trap itself is like literally a circular. It like mills like the materials to fuse for cost, then you banish that card for cost in the same chain to like perform the fusion, and it's like, and it just brings out both of them at once. Genuinely ridiculous card. I'm surprised it hasn't like gotten way more results back when it like first became a thing. To be honest with you, like it's actually kind of a disgusting interaction. But
I've lost to it before, like randomly. I think it was in Master Duel. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen it, but like if they pull it off, it's like, okay, what are you gonna do about it? But
exactly.
I do find it funny that they've built an entire deck just to summon Baguska.
With a lot of extra steps.
Yes.
You could say this is Babuska. All right, so how do we closing thoughts, I suppose? How do you feel overall about the set and stuff?
Not the greatest impact, but that was expected, I think, because I've looked at the set beforehand. Obviously, it kind of did what I expected. I am still happy about a lot of the small additions to older archetypes, like only because the set is overall not as meta changing as something like Age of Overlord was. I don't think that makes it a bad set in the overall sense. Like I still think there's a lot of cool stuff in here, a lot of stuff to be experimented with, and that's usually honestly the more fun stuff anyways, like not like the clearly broken deck that comes out of a pack, right? It's the stuff that's most exciting is when it's like, okay, well, kind of just okay stuff that you can mess around with. So I'm still pretty okay with the set. Tenpai remains to be seen how annoying it's going to be and how much of a pain it might end up becoming. Outside of that, I'm still happy with it.
For me personally, I think it's not really a set issue. It just feels like maybe like the format itself, with Snake Eye kind of still being around as like the de facto best deck. I don't think it's probably quite at the level where it's like overstayed its welcome, because it's definitely just going to be like the nationals and the WCQ decks to play. But what I will say is like seeing these cool like support cards for things like Ubel and personally as well Lightsworn, I cannot wait to like get my hands on the Dragon Lings that have now doubled over night on terms of their price since I looked at them yesterday. But yeah, that is like, for better or for worse, a lot of people like hate those styles of decks, but it's like they are such incredible support cards, and I can't wait to start playing that. So that's my deck of the format personally that I'm gonna start fooling around with.
Any
Um,
Lightsworn stuff?
any Lightsworn stuff? I mean, we're making the Minerva, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
that's that's the important thing. um, yeah, it's pretty cool. So that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in this week. I suppose we're gonna sign out for this one. I think next week I don't think there's anything particularly hot or crazy happening for the next little while. So we're probably gonna have a bunch of generic kind of topics.
I
Over
thought
the
we had a guest next week.
I was about to give that little announced surprise now. Fine, okay. Thanks for the spoiler, Josh. Next week,
You confused me because you were talking about other stuff.
the okay. So if you guys are wondering, next week's episode will be featuring Raran, the notorious enemy of Yu-Gi-Oh! He'll be joining us on the cast as a guest, probably at some point midweek as well during one of our streams, which you can tune into. All links in the description down below. It's probably going to be less Yu-Gi-Oh! Focused because I think we've gotten all of his thoughts and opinions on Yu-Gi-Oh! Quite substantially already. But the main topic of discussion, we've been looking at card games as a general type of thing because Josh is someone who's played a couple of other card games, some of them very well. And it'll be interesting to compare experiences and just have a general sort of like card game roundtable. I think should be an interesting topic. So, but also do please let us know about other generic topics and subjects that you want to have, because like I said, for the next month or so, it doesn't feel like there's going to be too much hot stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, we could like go over YCS or national results at some point, but in terms of new releases or stuff to cover, Legacy of Destruction is going to be the last new thing in a while, right? Like Rarity Collection 2 is happening, but that doesn't bring any meta changing cards, right? That's reprints, which is also, I mean, it's a good thing, but it doesn't give us a lot to talk about. You're like, okay, Market Watch with Farfa and Josh or what? Like,
All right, peace out, everyone. Comment, like, and
bye
subscribe
bye.
as always. Stuff in the description. I'll see you in the next one.